Christian parenting.
Hey friends, I hope you have signed up for our first ever Christian parenting digital event, Perfectly Imperfect. It starts tomorrow, October 23rd through October 24th, and we have over 50 speakers that are talking about all things parenting through the lens of the Bible. You will have access to the speakers through the end of the year, so there's no rush to hear them all, but we do want you to sign up and join us as we hear from people like Aaron and Jamie Ivey, to people from the Duck Dynasty clan. We've got speakers that want to talk to us about screens, about parenting teenagers, communication, and even people speaking into parenting with your newborns. There is so much coming your way. So go to mess.perfectlyimperfect.org. Again, mess.perfectlyimperfect.org. We'll link it in the podcast notes as well. And join us starting tomorrow, October 23rd and 24th, for our first ever digital event, Perfectly Imperfect. This is Cynthia Yanoff, and you're listening to Pardon the Mess. Each week we have honest discussions about the ups and downs of parenting and the lessons God is teaching us along the way. It's real, it's fun, and it's biblical. Life is messy. Don't walk the parenting road alone. Hey friends, welcome to Pardon the Mess. I'm glad you are with us today. We have Ken Wilgus back, and I can tell you that Ken Wilgus has been on our podcast before talking about anxiety in our kids, and it is one of the highest downloads we've had because it's just such a relevant topic. And so this is another one. He's speaking into the new social media documentary called The Social Dilemma on Netflix. I love what he has to say, and it was such an eye-opener for me. If you haven't watched it, it's worth watching. There's so much to it. One takeaway from it that I wanted to mention, and we talk all about it, so I'm not going to go into a lot in the intro, but one thing that I thought was interesting that I did not know, and y'all are probably like, well, come to the party, sister. But did you know that if I type in something like global warming is on Google, and you know how it fills in the rest of your sentence? I learned on the Social Dilemma that what fills in the end of that sentence for me is specifically tailored by algorithms for me. And it's based on where I am, what I believe, what part of the country, and what you might see would be completely different. I don't know why I thought like if I type in some generic whatever and it fills in that statement and how it populates is something that we would all have in common. Oh no, it's not that way at all. And so just all these nuances that were so interesting. So I'm excited for Dr. Wilgus to speak into what that documentary really says about social media for our kids and in our own lives. Dr. Wilgus, as you know, is a licensed psychologist. He specializes in the treatment of adolescents and their families. He's a sought-after speaker. He speaks into parenting, marriage, faith. He's written the book, Feeding the Mouth That Bites You. He also has a podcast under that same name. So I'm excited he's here today. Check out feedingthemouth.com or drwilgus.com. Here we go, talking about the social dilemma and how social media is impacting our kids. Ken Wilgus, welcome to Pardon the Mess. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me back.
Are you kidding, Dr. Wilgus? Thanks for coming back. I feel like we're letting other people listen in on my own personal counseling sessions on how to do this with kids. So really at the end of the day, I probably need to write you a check and say thank you for this time.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, you spoke on our podcast recently and you talked about anxiety and identifying it in our kids. And one, it was hugely downloaded and so many people loved it and listened, but it was so interesting. I got emails from people I do not know, which I always do, but these in particular are people saying like, my whole life I've been experiencing something, and until listening to this, I didn't realize I was dealing with anxiety.
Yeah, that's
or
great.
Fear or panic. Like not only were you speaking into how to identify it in our kids, but I think it was so relevant to people in our own lives. I know with me, I'm like, ooh, okay, that helps me know where I'm distinguishing between these three areas. So thank you for that. And if y'all haven't listened to that, go listen. It's so good. And so thanks for that. And
that is great to hear.
All right, here we go. The Social Dilemma came out on Netflix.
Which we're not supposed to be watching this Netflix anymore after they put out that movie Cuties.
I know, really. So it's like a mixed
bag.
This is
good. This one's good. It's a good thing. Good documentary.
Well, it is. And so I watched part of it last night and part of it this morning. So I have about 10 minutes left and then I'll go back and watch it with my older kids. But what I wanted to do is we're going to talk practically with you about social media and our kids and how to deal with that. And what I love about you, and I'll let you speak into this too, is that you always say, like, we're not going to parent based in fear, especially as believers.
Exactly. And this is one of those that runs the risk of, because what we're going to talk about is some important, serious things, even further impact that social media has than I knew. So it's going to be a bit tricky, because while we talk about the things to really be aware of, I'm glad you brought it up. I don't want to feed anyone's sense of fear, especially as believers. That's just not, it's something we should fight against all the time.
Yeah, it's not how we were created. And so, okay. And so with Social Dilemma, hopefully people have watched. If you haven't, it's worth watching. It's worth watching, I think, with your kids that are old enough to have devices and have social media. Give me a couple of your takeaways from it that like just kind of rocked you a little bit. I'm going to give you a couple of mine. And so let's just start with that little foundation.
Well, the Social Dilemma, and we're not going to summarize it because you really need to go watch it. But it is essentially a documentary that contains some of the most important founders and contributors to the major social media platforms: Facebook, Twitter, even YouTube, all these things. And these are the people that helped build this stuff, Google. And these people are telling us in great detail, there is great danger in these machines that we built, and we are very concerned. So it's a little like Frankenstein, Dr. Frankenstein coming out and going, okay, this didn't work out quite like I thought, and now it's dangerous. And that is really something to listen to. It's not some other authority, a pastor saying that's all bad. These are the people that made this stuff that are now, it's gone into things and out of control more than they ever thought it would. And so that's among the major reasons we need to listen to what they're telling us.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there was two kind of different areas. And again, go watch it. But these are the two areas that struck me the most. And I still have a few minutes left. I haven't seen the end of it. But number one, it talked about how it's a persuasive technology. And so it's not like a tool that we're using, like this is a tool that's for, I can use it or not use it, but it's going on and saying it's manipulating and it's addiction based. And the quote that kind of got me, it's a gradual, slight, imperceptible change in your behavior and perception that is the product. And so that addictive component to it really struck me, which I kind of think you can live life and have social media. And that as me as an individual, not even just looking at my kids, I find myself addicted to it at times. But them saying that was one takeaway. Did that speak into you too?
Yeah, no, that was Jaron Lanier, who's actually the father of virtual reality. He's a very odd and interesting looking guy, like a lot of geniuses are. That he's adding on to the more foundational quote, which is a big takeaway. If you're not paying for the product, then you are the product, which is so obvious, but I don't think I realized that. I used to think, well, okay, if I get on this, they might sell my email address to somebody. That is really naive. What you're being monitored for, what they produce, is every keystroke, every time you click a thing, everything that you show interest in, and they build models. They don't just, here, look, he clicked on this. It's whole models that predict more and more accurately what you and I are going to do if we are prompted with this or that thing. So you may think there's something interesting about the ad that popped up or the suggested video that YouTube brings up. It's far more than just interesting. It has been crafted and honed for one purpose: to keep you on this website. And they are getting frighteningly good at it. And that's one of the big things these people were talking about. Your attention is being sold. Your predicted activity, which they know what you're going to do, that's the product. Well, that's just more than I ever really realized.
It's scary. And just these algorithms that are so complex and so detailed, and just them talking about how even when you slow down on your pages and look at something, even if I don't necessarily click on something, they know that. And I say they, but these algorithms, these computers recognize this. And so they're tailoring it, and they have a story intertwined, which I don't know, it's somewhere between cheesy and maybe a touch. I mean, I think
I agree. The little video, yes. This family that is sweet family that goes through all kinds, they fall apart. It was a little dramatic, I thought.
Yeah, that wasn't my favorite part, but it was interesting because they were able to speak into the fact that, like, if we put our phones down and we're kind of ignoring it, or our kids are trying to ignore their phones, hell, there's even tactics to suck us back in, because what they need is us to be on these platforms so that we are influenced by advertisements, which equals dollars eventually. And I'm simplifying it, but so that, when I've gotten these before, it'll say, like, so I think you're tagged in this page, or you can tag yourself. I think there's a picture of you, or these different little tactics. So-and-so's online. So-and-so started a live video, these ways to suck us back in. I was like, ooh, this is very tricky behavior.
Sure. And in defense of the little drama part, which I'm glad you said that, I felt the same way. It is, however, pretty accurately, it's a forces that are being dramatically portrayed. One of which is the significant depression that our teen girls get into because of this likes thing, which is really kind of sad that, one of the people I had on there is Tim Kendall, who he was the director of monetization for Facebook. And he's still a young man. And he's now had to face the fact that he's the inventor of the like button. Well, good for you, Tim. No, he now has to see what his little invention is doing. And it was, one example that he never considered that would be the currency that tells so many teenage girls whether they are worth anything or not. And he's horrified by that.
Yeah.
The other one is the little dramatization of this teenage boy who gets radicalized politically. Well, again, is that a good drama? I don't know. I mean, I thought they did fine. But that's from this guy, French guy, I'm going to butcher his name, Guillaume Chaslot, who was the first developer of the algorithm in YouTube that is the thing that sets up your suggested videos. And his idea was, well, it makes more money if you look at this video, then we'll suggest more and more stuff that you want to see. Well, he never considered that what that has resulted in, very likely, is a world where someone on the right wing of a political spectrum sees an entire reality that looks to him like this is the world. Look at all these videos of all this stuff. And they face someone on the left wing with just as much certainty that, what are you talking about? Look, I've seen the world on my YouTube feed, and the world clearly shows that you're outrageous and crazy. And it is increased political polarization to a dangerous degree. And this poor French guy is stuck with, because he quit, YouTube a long time ago, he's stuck with the knowledge that his foundational software has very likely contributed to an almost civil war mentality in this country. These people are horrified by what's happened.
Totally. And it just goes to show, I think what you're speaking to is such truth, that the standards of what's right, the things that we're persuaded by, it's always changing. Our culture is going to change the standards of what's good, what's right, what's no, whatever. The only standard that doesn't change is God's word.
That's right.
And we know that as believers. We got to dig back into what matters. And a kind of part of that for me was just a reminder of, like, oh my goodness, let's get back to God's word. And when we're letting all these other things factor in, we've got to be able to counterbalance that with God's word. And the thing I think that struck me, and then we'll go into some real practical tips on how we're going to deal with this with our kids. But I thought it was interesting where he said, somebody was quoted there saying there's only two industries that call their customers users: illegal drugs and software. I was like, oh my gosh.
Great. I know it.
Yes. And one of the guys speaking into this, he said, like, I think it was the guy who was monetizing Facebook. He said, like, I spent all day finding ways to do this. And then I found myself at home. My kids wanted to spend time with me and play with me, all that. I couldn't get off my phone.
That's right. And it's not even, you have to keep in mind, this started, like, the major guy in this deal is named Tristan Harris, who now runs an ethical use of technology foundation. And he just worked at Google. He was helping develop Gmail. And he started this tiny little interest that faded quickly when he said, are we doing the right thing? What's the effect of these notifications that pull people into their email? And not fancy, this is just email. So when you mention about God's word, have you ever tracked? So I look at news like I'm the Secretary of State. Like, I've got to see everything, I don't know why. But I have tracked how hard is it for me to go to the time in God's word first, or do I feel this compulsion to look at my email, just check the headlines? And it is weird how drawn to that. It's like, yeah, no, I can totally look at God's word, but not until I've fill in the blank. Well, that, again, we know that, but what's important about this is, yeah, you know why you feel that? There are thousands of people on the other side of your screen creatively trying to make that hard for you not to do. That part is important to know. This is not one of the, I really liked the quote that was, social media isn't a tool that's just waiting to be used. It has its own goals and it has its own means of pursuing them. Research even shows that when we were doing screens, do you know there's a difference between if you and I are talking together at a dinner table and our phones are on the table versus if they're in our pocket, versus if they're in our car or in another room, versus if they're in another room and turned off. Like some part of your attention knows that it's there in some way, almost tracking a living being. And that has influence over you more than just a thing that I may choose to pick up, I may not choose to. It has its own drawing force toward you, and it's important to know that.
And so you think of this, and I think what maybe helps me a little bit in my parenting is knowing, like, at least I feel like I'm on the same page with my kids a little bit in this, because I am struggling with it as well. I didn't know, and I wouldn't have thought of it as an addiction. You know, there's certain things, especially in the church, there's certain addictions that we accept, like, you know, the food addiction, or there's certain addictions that are a little more.
Nothing wrong with that.
Right. It's a casserole, people. Get over yourself. But it's the more acceptable addictions. And so this maybe falls under one of those. But I think, okay, well, at least I'm in the same boat with my kids. I can appreciate to some degree what they're struggling with. And so obviously the tendency in parenting can be like, well, I'm going to strip away all social media. This is scary. We've got to get rid of it. But it's kind of like, you know, where you struggle, like, we get back to food for a minute, like with the alcoholic, and this is very complex. And so I'm just saying this on a surface level, but you can kind of think like, well, just don't ever touch alcohol again. But with someone that has like a food addiction, you can't say like never eat again, right?
That's correct.
That doesn't work. And so I look at the social media thing. This is not an alcohol. This is a food. This is something that's in their life. They're going to have to deal with it. Our kids are going to have to deal with it. We're going to have to deal with it. And that's a super poor analogy I'm making. But the point being is just that it's not going away. So for us to say to our kids, well, as long as you're under my roof, no social media.
That's right. Yeah. Well, okay. So that's sort of like what you're talking about is what I would consider the second step. The 10 minutes of the thing you haven't watched yet is essentially when they come to the conclusion, like you might expect, of the kind of legislation that needs to be done to deal with this. So, you know, like a lot of people, they're directing toward what we should do collectively in legislation. Well, number one, I don't think parents are going to wait for that. And number two, as Christians, this is pretty much a time to be fairly cynical about what can politics do. So we've already covered step one that parents need to know. Do not panic. We're not talking about something that God's going, wow, didn't see that coming. Totally part of what's happening. Number two, though, is what you said, and I think it's really important that you begin with a real evaluation of yourself. This isn't just information. Hey, kids, you got to come watch this. No, you watch it first and really, really prayerfully consider the impact it's having on you. Yeah. Because, and that's why I mentioned the Gmail thing. A lot of older folks, you know, like I'm not even on Facebook anymore and, you know, stuff like that. Well, you may think, well, good for me. Well, this started with notifications from Gmail, your text that you get. You have to really think about this a lot just for yourself. And then, and as you know, I specialize with teenagers, then you really do want to try to invite them into, hey, I want us to all watch this. And again, you know how it is when your parents are like, come here, we need you to see this. Well, that sounds like we need you to watch it. It's real important to try to be as honest about, like you said, this is part of, I'm with you in this, and I'm re-examining this, and I'm wondering what you think. That's a huge difference. Yeah. And then you start reconsidering what rules you'd have. Under 13, I'm fine with you really limiting monitoring with children. You're still teaching them how to manage these things. So I have less concern about other than just being not overly heavy-handed. But with teenagers, you've got to really rethink your goal. It is not to protect my little one from these bad influences. It is to progressively help to train them to handle it for themselves. Because you said it right. For us, it's this kind of maybe newish thing. This is their future. This is their world, and keeping them from it for the years you have, which is, by the way, impossible. You know how easy it is to get a device that you can log on, even if your mommy's taking your phone. So it's not only not really possible, it's not doing your job. They need to be prepared to have their own standards and how they're going to handle this for themselves.
Absolutely. And so I heard you say on your podcast, which, by the way, we need to link, and tell everybody the name of your podcast so they can check it out too.
Feeding the Mouth That Bites You.
Yeah,
podcast.
Based on a book. Yeah, based on a book he's written. Okay, so I heard you say it this way, and I think this is good, that here's the continuum with our kids that we need to take, depending on age, depending probably, I'm guessing you would say maturity and a whole lot of other factors, but it starts with, it's not a no to social media, but it's a not yet, all the way down the continuum to now it's yours. I'm handing it over.
Which needs to happen before they leave. Well, it's basically what I call planned emancipation, which is always the general approach with teenagers, that you need to get ahead of the curve. A young adult, which is what a 13 plus person is, has increasingly this itch to not do whatever I want, get away with stuff. The actual urge that's growing more and more is, why am I still having to do this your way? Why are you telling me how to handle this? And when will I be ready to make this decision myself? So that needs to be answered right up front. Like you start right off at 13 announcing that, okay, we get it, that you're on your way to adulthood where you're not going to need us. And so you try to be very conscious about not only the things you restrict, as those should become less and less, but you should also become very conscious about what you openly give, not privilege. Privilege you give to children. Like, you handled that well, I'll let you do more. Freedom is, son, you don't need to ask me about that anymore. If that's someone you think is a friend, then that's up to you. You're at your age you need to make your own friends. The things you hear from me about not liking your friend, that's just advice. It's not have to. That kind of clarity that we are backing out of your life is what we're talking about. And social media is the same thing. It's basically the steps of, no, you're too young to have social media, but then there should be a point of, okay, you can have social media, but I need to be on your feed, to the point that most parents forget is sometime before they leave your house, senior year, something. Oh, by the way, I'm pulling off your feed. That's your deal now. So that they know that we are for them in their eventual self-management and adulthood.
Okay, and so that's so good, and that applies not just obviously to social media. That's across the board. From I've heard you saying, we'll talk more about this in another podcast, but everything from curfews to maybe internet access, a whole lot of things. Hey friends, jumping in here for just a minute to thank Faithful Counseling for sponsoring our podcast today. I want to read you one of the reviews on Faithful Counseling that I saw online. It says, the counseling has been a total blessing to my life and to the state of my mental health. My counselor is well versed in many methods and practices, yet relies on the Spirit to guide him into the right practice at the right time. This is just one of the many people that are benefiting from the services of Faithful Counseling. Faithful Counseling is secure, online, professional counseling. It's available worldwide. You can log onto your account anytime and send a message to your counselor. You'll receive thoughtful and timely messages, but you can also schedule weekly video or phone sessions. Faithful Counseling is committed to facilitating great therapeutic matches, so they'll make it easy and free to change counselors if you need to. It's more affordable than traditional offline counseling. So go to faithfulcounseling.com/pardonthemess and receive 10% off your first month of counseling. Again, it's faithfulcounseling.com/pardonthemess. I know you well enough to know that you're not going to say, now here's the hard set ages. This is the first step is 13, the next one's, but what are some of the factors we're looking at in determining when it needs to be a not yet versus a, okay, here you go with boundaries kind of thing too, that you've said it's yours as senior in high school probably. But yeah,
that's a good point. I think that what may be surprising is that probably the biggest factor to keep in mind is the giant clock on the wall that you need to imagine, which is counting down. You've seen those where it's this many years, months, weeks, days to finish. And finish for virtually everyone listening is the day after your teenager graduates high school. It does not mean you're finished with your relationship. It certainly doesn't mean that you're finished with your influence, but by that point, your ability to restrict, threaten, and control is virtually zero compared to the resentment, frustration, and sneakiness that will undermine everything you're doing. So it is important. The reason that we strongly push planned emancipation and backing out is to increase parents' influence, not to decrease. So often when parents don't know any other way to parent other than control, teach, and manage, then the idea of backing out feels to them like, so they're just going to go do whatever. No, what you haven't experienced is that when you consciously back out, that's between you and God now. That's not my deal. If that's the music you want to listen to on a Sunday morning in your little headphones, then I'm praying for you, buddy, but it's not up to me anymore. That kind of approach, which is rare, not among feeding method by two parents get it, but it's rare, but it increases the ability to talk about it. Like, can I just ask you as an adult, do you feel okay with that? I mean, Kanye going through your headphones before we're going to church, how is that for you? Well, he's a Christian, Mom. Okay, fine. But that sort of communication is hugely influential. And with social media and with this information from the documentary, you need to be influential, just like you said. Hey, I've been thinking about that documentary, and what did you think? Because here's what I'm thinking. That's much more influential than an angry, which I had two this week, as a matter of fact, in my office, angry teenager who's 17 and they won't let me have social media. By the way, both of them have social media, but their parents don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
You need to be influential.
Yeah. And so you've kind of alluded to this, but being very practical, what are some conversations that we should be having around social media with our kids? If we're not going to just yank it all away, or we're not going to try to control it to death, we want to have the right conversations around it. Give us a few starting points, a few questions to maybe address with our kids that have social.
Okay, that's a good for children. And I don't know how much social media people are allowing for their 12-year-olds, but for children, I think it's still pretty direct teaching. Like, I'm going to let you have this, but here's what we're going to do, and here's what we're concerned about, and just pretty much tell them. But with teenagers, I think you start by talking about yourself. Like, here's the impact this, documentary had on me. That's always more important and easier for teenagers to hear. And then secondly, genuinely listen. Listening is not listen long enough to then make the little comeback response you have, that you have that friend of yours that's like, yeah. But here's what I think. Well, that's not listening, So right. You really listen. And then thirdly, one of the things that I did like about the weird little drama thing, remember that there's a part in this that's sort of like a dark Inside Out. Remember that Disney movie Inside Out where you're in her, mind, and there's well, they do a dark version of that where they personify these algorithms with these three guys that are like, send him a like from somebody, remind him that, and this kid is like this little figure just being manipulated by them. They even show that. Well, I think that could be a touch point of conversation. Like, not just, dude, I'm sorry that I had to take your phone from you yesterday because you brought it again to the dinner table. But you could also go, what it made me think of? And you may think this is crazy, but remember that scene in the movie where the avatar of you is just, yes, dude. Do you ever think about that? That's you. That's me. That could be, trying to use that as a way of also sharing about how we feel about it. And I think those are different ways that a documentary like this could be helpful. Something you can refer back to. Make it a joke. Like, yeah, of course you need to finish that. That's what I'm sure Mark Zuckerberg has told you. You must answer that right now.
Yeah.
Shut up, Dad. That's not true. Whatever.
It's working.
Exactly.
It's working. Yeah, it's been working on me too. Okay, and so you said something so interesting on your podcast, and I think I kind of knew this, but not really. I hadn't thought about it the way you said it, but this is just generally relating to social media. And you were talking about how social media is completely impacting how our kids are going through puberty, and especially in our girls. And you were saying how that they're in puberty, and I'm going to let you speak of this, but specifically what hit me was you were saying in puberty, you're trying to figure out who you are, why people respond to the way I look or don't look. Am I pretty? Am I not? And then you add this social media component, and it has just thrown everything askew. And so can you tell us a little bit about that? And how do we do this well, knowing that it's impacting their puberty? What do we say? What are the conversations?
Well, it's currently popular to talk about how boys and girls, teenagers, whatever, go through much the same thing. But anyone that's worked with adolescents for 30 years knows that that's not true. Boys, for example, when their bodies change, there's absolutely a self-consciousness about it. You can watch, I remember watching my kids look in the mirror, but part of it is because they look so different so often. They're trying to figure out, what do I even look like? The impact for girls is just hugely different, because a girl is now changing to what more like a woman and less like a girl. And the impact of her, the visual of her body on the people around her, particularly boys and men, is, first, for most every girl I've talked to, it's scary. They don't quite know, what is this? And then number two, they almost always assume this is not good. This is a bad thing. So that's tough enough as it is. But you add to that now this whole hugely blown up dimension of, what do I look like photographically? What do I look like from my arm's length of a camera? And it's number one, the most shallow way of presenting yourself ever. And number two, it adds a self-consciousness level that never was before. I think I mentioned that if you ever look at photos from the late 1800s, these are not people that have practiced selfies. They look like they're on drugs. They don't even know what the picture is going to look like. Well, man, we are experts. Wait, hold the camera up higher. I don't want my chin to look good, and all this stuff. And filters, oh my goodness, filters. Nothing says, hey, the real you isn't good enough, like a filter. You need this,
Totally.
You look so much better with puppy nose and ears. It's like, why are you? So that is an extra burden in the otherwise difficult process of teenage girls trying to figure out, how do I appear to the world of men? And it's difficult as enough, but to add to this is just really a huge burden. And really, you need to talk to your girls about it. Their dads need to talk to their girls about it. And if you're a single mom, you're the closest family member that's a guy that you trust to know how to talk about this needs to talk to her also. Moms usually do, but men need to tell them, look, it's sort of like, as a representative of the world of men, you are lovely, you are interesting, you are funny, and I don't want anything from you. I'm just telling you that because I love you. Mm. Because right behind that guy is a line of guys. I don't want to make this into all boys are jerks, but there's a line of guys that would absolutely love to tell her how great she is, but they want something back.
Yeah. Yeah. I just think it brings such empathy too. And the importance of empathy with our girls as they're going through this. And, I know when you can think, oh, it's just a moody teenage girl, or even our boys. I mean, I have a son in 8th grade. And so he's going through all this middle school stuff too, but it just gives empathy. It's funny you're saying this, Dr. Wilgus. This falls on the lighter note. Having done a whole lot of Zooms, you and I are looking at each other right now on Zoom. Since then have gotten Invisalign because I realized I have a gap in my teeth I can't live with. And I'm getting a new person that highlights my hair differently. Okay. So it's like real life over here. But it is like kind of a microcosm of what our kids are dealing with. I'm not that impacted by a selfie or how I look on social media, but I've looked at myself on Zoom for a long time. I'm like, good grief, let's deal with some of these issues.
But that's a perfect example, because in social sciences, I spend my time with women. I talk with my colleagues are women. It's just a very high percentage. So I've learned all this. I know that even this, because you and I like each other, in corollary to what you're talking about, I've done a fair amount of Zoom stuff. I'm a 62-year-old man. Who cares? I barely even comb my hair. The pressure is way different to say that, well, it's the same for both. No, it's not.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
Yeah, totally. Okay. So let's think about this as we're starting to kind of wrap up. Now, you've spoken into social media. You've worked with teens. I mean, obviously you have a master's in psychology and you work into teens, and you've spoken into social media for years because that's a big deal in our teens and it has a big impact. Now, on the other side of this documentary that came out, what has changed in your philosophical thinking and how you would speak into parenting this? What do you know now that you would give maybe a different sort of advice towards this? And along with that, what boundaries would you suggest, maybe even in your own life, but with others, to start thinking about putting into place?
Well, that's an important point. So prior to this, a lot of the research drew me toward parents need to think about screens, sort of like it mattered less of the content of the screen. It's literally the screens themselves. And a lot of the boundaries really still should focus on not just you can't look at this, but you can look at this. But your first line is to actually think about all of our screens are going to go on the kitchen charger by 9 p.m., by 10 p.m., not even in your room. Because again, the research even shows that even having it in your room, and now if you watch The Social Dilemma, you'll know that there is some algorithm dinging you at the right point. That kind of thing, I think, remains the same. You need to think about when they cannot have it in their room anymore. Oh, and by the way, until some point in their senior year, I hope, where now, here you go, you decide for yourself if you want to keep it in your room. So it's not ever no, it's always not right now. But so that part remains the same. You really need to set limits. I think I mentioned, I still kind of like that book, The Tech-Wise Family. Wasn't that Andy Crouch? He's got, I think, a pretty reasonable way of kind of looking at that. But it still starts with literally when and where screens are allowed. At the dinner table, I don't think in your pocket counts. I think, it's pretty reasonable. Now, your teenagers will hate this, but don't forget, it's not because they are addicted to phones. It's because that will fall into what a lot of teenagers think about many of your rules, which is, this is crazy. You're nuts. This is my phone, my life. Why are you even bothered? So don't be surprised at their unhappiness with it. But again, limits of where you can even have devices is actually important. But this adds then number two, that with children, it adds even more to really think about, when are we really going to say yes to social media? I think you need to be more careful. Older, my whole limits of this has gone up about a year. I used to be more when it comes to video games and devices, that needed to be by middle adolescence, let go of that. I've had to move that up. The research makes it where it is, that needs to happen later. It still needs to happen, but later. So you might say no to social media a little longer. Again, like, I'm glad you said not particular age, but maybe 14. Bill Gates' kids didn't even have phones till they were 14. So, shut up. But, it's like, you might be careful as to when you allow them into that, but don't wait too long. If all of their friends are on it, and they'll always tell you all the friends are on it, but check, then they really do need to be on it. And then secondly is when you really need to, which is really the point of our whole talk today, you really need to find the best way to start an ongoing dialogue about this force in our lives, not theirs, ours, talking about what it's had on you and talking about that. You want to be that parent with, Mom, are we talking about that again? I know, sorry, I'm just worried, that's fine. Keep talking about it while they have the appropriate level of freedom to handle it themselves, so that they can really be conscious of, how am I going to manage this in my own life as a young adult?
Yeah. That's also good. Let me jump back and ask one quick question there. You said something about, like, when all of their friends have it, then you do need to let them have it. And so that, and someone's listening to this and saying, well, I'm not the parent that just because everybody else does it, we do it. Okay. What's your response to that?
Number one, don't take your kid. I'll remind you, do not take your teenager's word that everyone has it. The teenager will not tell you the two other kids that don't have it. They're just not going to tell you that. But number two, if there's reason to believe that's accurate for a teenager, again, I think the idea of, I'm not going to go with what other parents do with children, and even, certain school choices, whatever, that's fine. But with a young adult, which is what our adolescents are, you really need to take into account their world. And is this having the impact on their world that I want it to? And the kind of parenting that you're talking about, the sort of checklist, well, I can say before God, I did my part, and what implies, and I don't care what actually is the suffering of my teenager. Again, like everything else, that's incredibly ineffective parenting. So it's not about, I have to go along with what other parents do. It is about taking seriously if this limit is keeping my teenager from developing the kind of skills that she or he needs to as they get older, and connecting with friends, then you need to take that seriously. I don't think you always have to give in, but I think it's a mistake if you sort of out of some compulsive need to do it right, take no regard for the suffering they're having. That's just ineffective.
Yeah, yeah. And so take it from a mom who is raising a senior in high school now. My first one is getting ready to go to college. And I'm now realizing the value of being able to parent certain things while it's under my roof, with things that I wanted to avoid on her behalf, on all of my kids' behalf, or I didn't want them to have exposure to. I'm now like, wait, let's have exposure to it while they're still here and I can speak into it biblically and just as a parent. So that's definitely a good word for us.
It's just so much more influential. It really does impact your teenagers.
All right. Dr. Wilgus is our good friend. We're so glad you're here. You speak such wisdom. His podcast is Feeding the Mouth That Bites You. That's the name of your book as well, right? I have it sitting here somewhere.
Yeah,
okay.
It's from a quote that all parents of teenagers go, oh, that's exactly what it feels like.
Totally. Thank you for being here. And we're excited because you have very kindly agreed to join us about once a month and speak into parenting issues from your perspective, especially as a degreed professional, which I am not. So I'm thankful for that. And so I'd also just love to tell people, like, I go to Cynthia, my email, cynthia@christianparenting.org. Again, cynthia@christianparenting.org. Send us questions you might have that Dr. Wilgus could speak into, some thoughts you have. I would love to relay some of those to him. Maybe we'll just have a day that's a Q&A of specific questions, but thanks for being here.
I would love that. And we can offer a prize. If you can get a question that I haven't been asked yet, I would love to see that. I haven't had a new question in 10 years. It's like parents have the same stuff, which is comforting really, but I would love to be stumped.
As Solomon says, nothing new under the sun.
I know.
So, all right. Thanks, Dr. Wilgus. Loved having you again.
Thanks so much. This was fun.
All right. There was a lot packed in there, right? I am so grateful for Dr. Wilgus. He's so amazing, and that I get to talk to him all the time. It really is like my own little therapy session and parenting session. But I don't know what your takeaway was. There's a lot for me. I think it spoke as much into what I need to change in my life as how I need to parent it. Go watch it if you haven't seen The Social Dilemma. And then I guess that whole quote, if you're not paying for the product, then you're the product. That's a lot to chew on and to think about. So I hope this was helpful to you. Figure out ways to do social media well with your kids. But I think it was also just a reminder that we're not going to parent out of fear. We are not given a spirit of fear or timidity, right? But we have strength and confidence in Christ. And so go forward with that in your parenting, if nothing else. I appreciate you being here. We know your days are busy. So as always, thank you for joining us as we pardon the mess.